Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this Achates Philanthropy live stream on the 19th of May. Welcome all of you. I am Kerry Isles. I'm the Executive Director of Achates Philanthropy, and we're looking forward to talking to you this afternoon. This afternoon's session is going to be led by our director, Caroline McCormick, who will pop up on your screen shortly. Are you there, Caroline?
Yes, I think you need to start my video for me.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Thank you. There we are. Hello, everybody.
Now she can wave at you. Great. So, and also in this afternoon's session, I'll introduce them a bit more shortly. We have Andrew Higgins of the Imperial War Museum, Stephanie Renouf of the Sainsbury Centre, Helen Gaffney of Arnold Feeney, and Bernard Donoghue of Alva. We're excited to have so many guests this afternoon. It should be a really interesting session. We're looking this afternoon at what happens at the end of lockdown. I think it's something that is on everyone's minds, both personally and professionally at the moment. I certainly know there's been lots of conversations going on at Achates Philanthropy about what things might look like across the sector, certainly over the coming months. And I think this conversation is just about us starting to think about what things might look like, what are the challenges that we see coming up. And we're particularly focusing on museums and galleries this afternoon, because the expectation is that museums and galleries are likely to be able to open before other arts and cultural venues. It's not to say that everybody on this stream has got the ultimate answer to how we manage this. Sadly, I don't think anyone has the ultimate answer at the moment to exactly how we do any of these things we're trying to do right now. We're all just doing our best as human beings. I think it's worth noting that all the views in this afternoon session are current as of today, the 19th of May. As we all know, the situation is still changing fairly rapidly. So if you're looking at this in a week or so's time, things may have changed. Caroline, do you have anything to add at this point?
No, I mean, I think, first of all, welcome, as Karen said, to everybody. I'm Caroline McCormick, and I'm the Director of Achates Philanthropy. And thank you to all of you for your support. As you know, we were running our Achates live sessions at the Old Vic Theatre prior to COVID-19. And ever since the Old Vic Theatre was forced to shut, we've been running them fortnightly online, really to create a community of people thinking together and to share the knowledge we have between us. I think we always like to say how proud we are to support such an amazing and dynamic sector, which is supporting its communities in so many ways. And to my mind, demonstrating the value of art more than ever at this time, because surely it's one of the things that we're living for. And today, I personally would like to pay special tribute to the trusts and foundations in the sector. I think, like many of us, I've just been absolutely overwhelmed by how fantastic they've been. And really, I think it's a tribute to them all and to the commitment they have to the sector, how quickly they've reached out and supported organisations. And I'm sure as a result, saved many, many great cultural organisations from closure. So thank you to all of you in the trusts and foundations sector. As you said, Karen, we've got 4 very special guests today who are going to share their knowledge and expertise with us. We have Helen Gaffney, an old friend of Achates Philanthropy, our former executive director, who's commercial development manager at Arnold Feeney in Bristol now, and we couldn't resist having her with us today. We have Dr. Andrew Higgins, who's Director of Development at the Imperial War Museum, which means he's based not only here in London, but of course working nationally as well. And we also have one of our good friends, Stephanie Renouf, who's Head of Development at the Sainsbury Centre over in Norwich, which is of course part of the University of East Anglia. So university perspective being brought in there as well. So we thought that was a great panel, but we're also really privileged today to have Bernard Donoghue, who's Director of Alva, with us. And many of you will be familiar with his daily emails and the fantastic research that they've been doing in terms of looking at the issues the sector's been facing and attitudes towards those issues from audiences. So we're very lucky to have Bernard, who is going to lead the slot, which is known as the Achates Philanthropy Prize Golden Nugget. So it's a little special feature we have at the end of the session, whereby we have words of wisdom from a sector leader really to round things up for us. So delighted to have our 4 special guests. Kerry-Ann, shall I jump into the topic?
I think we should, yes. I mean, yeah, I think we have got a number of people that have joined us on the live stream at the moment. So yeah, absolutely. I think it would be great to jump into the topic.
Fantastic. Well, I'm really delighted to be able to say that today's session came from a suggestion from one of you. I've committed to not saying who it is, but thank you so much for suggesting this session. I think it's really, really helpful, and I hope you will do too. As Kerry-Ann's already said, museums and galleries are likely to be amongst the first organisations in the cultural sector to reopen. And whilst social distancing may be a key issue to manage, and something that is perhaps something that the galleries are really already thinking about, there are of course a range of challenges which resonate with all of you across the sector, no matter what art form you're working in. So with limited direct interaction with audiences, how do we communicate need? How do we express value? How do we gather data? How do you establish a sense of community and drive giving and support? How long will this phase last? And what new model are we working towards? Museums have seen the second biggest growth in individual giving, but the majority of this income has been focused on the capital, particularly through major gifts. Should we be trying to change this at this time? Or perhaps should we be moving to a more mainstream charity model? We've charged our special guests today with a lot to think about. And whilst we don't expect them, as Kerry-Ann said, to have all the answers, I'm confident they're going to give us many good ideas and lots to think about. So I'm going to introduce our first three special guests. If I can ask Kerry-Ann, if you could turn on the cameras of Helen, Andrew and Stephanie, I will introduce them. Kerry-Ann, here we go. Everybody's emerging. There's Andrew. Kerry-Ann, can we turn on Stephanie and Helen's camera? There's Helen. Just Stephanie left to reveal. There we are. Wonderful. Thank you. So, first of all, we have Helen Gaffney, as I've said, who's development manager at the Arnolfini. Would you say hello, Helen? And
hi, hello.
Helen, tell us very briefly something about yourself and the Arnolfini.
Absolutely. So I've been with Arnolfini just since January, the start of the year. We are Bristol's principal international contemporary arts centre, and it's a really challenging time for us. We rather publicly left Arts Council's national portfolio in the latest round, so it feels like we've been replanning for some time.
Fantastic. Thank you, Helen. Look forward to hearing from you in just a moment. Next, we have Dr. Andrew Higgins of the Imperial War Museum. Hello, Andrew. Let me turn your mic off. You'll turn your mic on even.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me now? Great. So Andrew Higgins, Director of Imperial War Museum. So the Imperial War Museum is dedicated to telling the personal stories of modern war and conflict. And we do that in 5 different venues, 3 based in London, 1 in Duxford, and 1 in Manchester. And I started as Director of Development in February after being at Glyndebourne Opera for 11 years as Director of Development. So it was quite an interesting time to start and quite an interesting time to be developing a new fundraising strategy, which is one of the projects I'm working on now.
I'm just delighted you had time to meet your
timing is everything.
Absolutely lovely to have you with us, Andrew.
Thank
and
you.
Finally, Stephanie, such a pleasure to have you with us this afternoon. Can you tell us a little bit? Let's take your mic off. Your mic on there. Kerry-Ann, could you help with the mic? There we are, Stephanie.
Hi, hello everybody, and Caroline, thank you. It's lovely to be here, lovely to be part of these sessions where we've just shared minds together. The Sainsbury's Centre is the art gallery museum that was perhaps one of the greatest examples of post-war philanthropy we have in this country. The Sainsbury's not only gave their fantastic collection of global art drawn from across the world, we termed the phrase world art, and not only did that, but built the building to house it as well. And it's a great collection to work among. It's very loved in Norfolk. Everyone refers to it as their little gem in the county, and we hope that gem will turn into very big gemstones after this period.
Wonderful, thank you, Stephanie. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to in turn ask each of our 3 guests today to speak for around 5 minutes each on a specific area of the challenges they're thinking about going forward, after which I will ask them some questions, and then the questions will be open to you. So please do start to think about what you'd like to ask our really eminent speakers about. So firstly, Helen, I'd love to ask you to talk about the idea of a new normal again. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Caroline. Yeah, it's a strange situation for us at Arnolfini. It is a new normal again. We're replanning our organisation, albeit rather sooner than we had imagined we would need to. In the last year, we've really been focused on a fundamental step change to remodel our business. We've redesigned our activities and we've repositioned ourselves in our community. And we've really been thinking about what it is to be a modern contemporary arts centre, and also listening to our audiences and what they want and what they need. Underpinning all our work in this remodelling, we've also established a new university partnership with UWE here in Bristol. We've also been awarded a renewed funding agreement with ACE in support of our activities. This supports our core work, but what we're really keen to do is activate this with a ladder of engagement, and this is funded mainly from our commercial income. For us, that comes from our bookshop, our cafe bar, our hires and our tenancies in the main. And also at the heart of all that we do now is our new model of co-creation and collaboration. So we have a new, nimble and rather resilient model in place, and this was our year to expand on that and build our work going forwards. This, of course, has now been refocused, and as a result of all of the changes we've been making over the last couple of years, we aren't facing an immediate short-term crisis, but what we do need to do is shift gear rather quickly to ensure we've got resilience going forwards for the medium term and beyond. We know what we need to do is we need to develop and test new commercial products, and we know that we need to embed our work in our community and demonstrate its social impact. We've realised that this emergency has accelerated our planning we were already doing to share resources with the sector, collaborate and engage our audiences, and involve our communities in all that we do. We are in this unique and nimble position to move forwards and make these changes quickly. And this wouldn't be possible without the support of our university partnership at this stage. They activate our ambition on so many levels, and actually their support enables our building costs. So we're really in a position where that's enabled our work going forwards. In terms of next steps and what we're thinking about, we've announced a programme of exhibitions to reopen our gallery with. We can't put a date on when we will reopen, but what we want to do is keep our audiences engaged with our work, communicate what we're working towards so that we're not kind of this silence for them. And we're looking forward at ways to navigate our building when we do reopen in line with all the restrictions and what they might be. We're thinking about time slots for entry. We're thinking about how people can navigate the building. And we anticipate leading this with our bookshop at some point in the summer period to test our approach and work out from there what that means for our visual exhibitions. Thinking about how our impact in our community, we recognise there's a platform here that develops projects linking art with health and well-being. And what we're doing at the moment is developing some science-based partnerships in Bristol which support this approach, and we're exploring what this looks like. We're also thinking about shifting public appetites and thinking about how we can use our space to increase learning interest in learning, creativity, making. It feels like lots of people are using this time to explore that. So whether that's to do digitally or physically, we're thinking about how we can be improving our offer to meet that expectation. And we'll be launching a donations campaign in the coming weeks. We'll be reaching out to our young audiences, and we'll be thinking about how opening up that conversation with them places power back in their hands and starts to move towards our mission to think about placing communities at the heart of all that we do. I think as well, for us, it's really key at this moment, the acceleration of our plans of co-creation and engagement with our communities. We know that by sharing our resources in this way, we're supporting not only the sector, but we're really accelerating that mission to break down the physical barriers of our gallery. And we think there's a space for us to be doing this digitally in the first instance, but what we of course want to do is take those audiences with us when we reopen.
Fantastic. Thank you, Helen. That's absolutely superb. And it is really inspiring to hear about how Anna Feeney, having already performed a very significant pivot, is now doing so again. And I know that we're all looking forward to hearing more about that on specific points in just a moment. I'm now going to turn to Andrew Higgins, if I may. Andrew, you've been particularly thinking about re-engaging your donor base and how you're working in this period and how you're going to do that as you go forward. Could you tell us a little more, please?
Yes, no, happy to. So I came into Imperial War Museum with a kind of very unique perspective. I mean, Imperial War Museum has done incredible work at raising large amounts of money for big capital campaigns. And it's a great team there led by Diane Leese, our Director General. And what we want to move towards is a broader based fundraising approach where we still have capital campaigns that we raise money for, but we're also broadening our fundraising base. So what I was doing a lot of look at before all of this happened, before our Armageddon, was how do you engage with that kind of that lower and mid-level donor base to kind of bring them up the giving pathways. So we have 35,000 IWM members, for example. We have people that come into our 2 museums that are free admission and 3 are commercial revenue generating. How do we get to know about those people more, and how do we create those opportunities for engagement so that we can move them along that giving pathway? So we're building a new crop of people who can then later fund those bigger capital campaigns. So that's what I was looking at before Armageddon. And then I think what Armageddon really has caused us to do, which I think is a really good thing, is really pay attention to donor care and make sure that in this period, we are staying in very close contact with all our major donors, all our patrons. So we've done a lot of, mail outs of information, phone calls. I was on the phone this morning with one of our patrons, just talking about what they're going through. And I think empathy is such a key element here. This idea of friend raising. It's not about fundraising right now, it's about friend raising. And that will pay off in dividends later on. But so it is really about staying in touch, letting people know what's going on. So we're about to open next autumn now, our incredibly new Second World War and Holocaust galleries, which is a complete reinterpretation of the Second World War and Holocaust, and it's going to be amazing. And we've been staying in very close touch to all the people who have given us money for that, basically. So they know what the new timeline is. They know what some of the new items in the collection are, etc. So that engagement, I think, is really, really important. And I think the other thing we've been looking at, I think that something that's going to come out of this too, is I think the new metric is going to be not how many visitors come to your museum, but how many people actually engage with your collections. And that includes digital. And through this period, our marketing and communications and education teams have been doing incredible work at creating digital content that we have been pushing out. So we have a 60-second curating little thing that goes on Facebook and Twitter, where one of our curators will curate an object for 60 seconds. We have adventures in schooling for homeschooling, so lots of that. And when we did our recent Victory in Europe Day, which was originally planned as this incredible, outside event, and people were going to walk down the mall, and we had to put the kibosh on that. We did it all online, and we had over 150,000 people visit our website on that day to listen to those audio clips of Churchill and people talking about what it was like to be those personal stories of VE Day. And so one of the things we work very closely on is how do we equate those types of offerings with the opportunity to, one, get the message out that IWM is a charity, and 2, the opportunity to actually donate and support. And I think one of the last things I'll say we're finding is those people that really care about what you do want you to continue. They want to support you. So I think in a way, this is not the time to put the pedal on fundraising. It's really to focus on your core supporters and use empathy and friend raising, basically, so that they really feel that we are going to continue, but to do that, we need your support. So it's been a very interesting period, and I think we've learned a lot of lessons out of it.
Yeah.
Next one.
There we are, Andrew. That's so valuable. Thank you. And those of you that are familiar with Achates and familiar with the Achates Prize will appreciate what music that is to my ears, to hear how you're looking at a much broader model and driving that pipeline, to hear you talk about the museum as a charity. And I know that you've performed an amazing turn as an organisation, how you tell your story and how you interpret your collection. So it's really exciting to see what you're doing. And of course, just amazing to hear 150,000 people with you on VE Day. Absolutely remarkable. Congratulations. So now another type of gallery again, the wonderful Sainsbury's Centre over in Norwich, which I have to confess is a gallery that I love dearly. Stephanie, tell us a bit about what you've been doing and how you're thinking about renewing the case for support.
Thanks, Caroline. Well, it was a time when everything was suddenly looking good post-Brexit, wasn't it? Then this came along. We just about dusted ourselves down from various dynamics. And fortunately for the Sainsbury's Centre, as the word came down, it was shut down, the BBC had contacted us about culture in quarantine. And we were very fortunate in that we were chosen. And at the 11th hour, they made a film which was then broadcast on the Museums from Home Day. And I have to say, that gave the Sainsbury's Centre one great big woomph when it came to visibility, which was fantastic for us for sharing with our supporters in every way, for also widening the message of the centre. Norfolk, East Anglia is very local and proud, but we are an international and national gallery, and it really helped with our profiling. We'd already seen ticket numbers soar, our PR was on a high for it, and then thankfully the BBC film had really helped us. What it also helped us drive was all our social interface. Because the doors were closed, like every other museum and gallery, we were having to look at how do we talk to our audiences. So we again developed socials. I can agree with Andrew, our PR and Marcoms team were fantastic in ensuring that we had lots of messages and the messages were going out there. And we all know as development people and as fundraisers that when the message is out there, it's far easier to pick up the phone, to build on a little bit of knowledge there. So I really got to grips with publicizing all the great stuff and telling the stories, because that's what we do best. And I think even when we are in an environment which is conspiring against everything we're trying to do, if we can stick to what we know best and do best, then that helps us come round in the end. It's very simple, very straightforward. The other thing that we developed, our learning team, who had never done anything digitally, have completely transformed our learning online and targeted various age groups. So we were all the while building, they were giving me the opportunity to build and develop relationships at a time when our donors, who love being in the gallery for that glass of wine and chat around a piece of artwork and introduction to something else, were starting to feel, oh, we can't do that now. So we introduced e-coms called Armchair Art, nothing particularly unique about that, but we kept in touch with everything we're doing. I'm just about to broadcast to our donors about the learning program, because we were very fortunate in that we have 25 talented young artists who work with us as adult educators. And they really have turned around our digital learning. We've focused on them. One has prepared a little video, 3-minute video, do this at home with your family. We've also looked at older children who perhaps want something to do that isn't, you know, the classroom environment, something that's a little bit more fun. We've also looked at the ethos of the Sainsbury's Centre. And that was all about the Sainsbury's having beautiful things in their home and artworks in their home. And we've tried to turn that into a positive message that actually being in the home is a great place to be, and look around you, because you can fall in love again with your home, do different things, create little scenarios, just like the Sainsbury did, moving the artwork around their homes. We were also fortunate, and I echo your words about trusts and foundations, Caroline. Our our team managed to secure an Art Fund grant, which has also enabled us to carry on employing these freelance artists who we work with to drive the learning program forward so that we can begin to do the next part of the campaign. So even when the doors open, we've still got some learning going on if people can't come into the building to do those team things. The other thing I just want to talk about is we have at least 10,000 school children that come through the Sainsbury's Centre a year. And we work very closely with rural schools where we know there isn't any art on the curriculum, and we're helping them with that. We're also developing programs, bespoke programs now with teachers. We've reached out to them and said, what do you need? What can we help you with? And we're putting together a kind of blended learning moving forward into the gallery. To come back to your case for support question, I believe that people have just got a different attitude and approach to giving. We saw what Major Tom, Colonel Tom had achieved in his, and also I think that's shown that everybody can be a donor. I think in the past there's been, oh, do I have that much money to give? How can I come into this? Again, paralleling with what Andrew was saying, that it was really engaging with people and saying, yes, you know, you can give with us and you can give to us, and everything that you're giving to us is important.
Stephanie, you know only too well that a message of democratising philanthropy is going to bring nothing but joy to my heart. So thank you. That's really, really inspiring to hear. A couple of things I just want to quickly pick up on that you said there. And one was really about how you'd started to work with your education and learning team much more collaboratively, and there seemed to be almost a shifting and repositioning of the message and brand within that you're sharing with your donors, which I think is super, and I'd love to come back to that in the questions in a moment. The other thing that you picked up on, which I thought was also really inspiring, was the fact that you asked the schools what they wanted. And that's great. I too often worry that arts organisations are afraid of consulting their audiences of different kinds. And each of you have, I think, demonstrated in different ways how you're listening and engaging, how you're becoming a community as an organisation. And that to me is just really inspiring, because I think that community is why we're on this call today, isn't it? We're all really wanting that in our lives at the present time. So thank you, all of you. I think they're really great, inspiring examples. I'm going to go back to basics. So I'm going to ask you some questions, but I'm going to ask you in the turn order that I'd essentially ask you to present in. So starting with you, Helen, just making sure your mic is there. First of all, Helen, tell us about where you are in terms of coping with COVID-19, and you presumably had to furlough quite a lot of the staff. Tell me about the operating environment briefly.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have had to furlough a lot of staff at Arnold Feeney, obviously our front of house team, events team, bookshop team, anyone kind of public facing has been part of that furloughing scheme. I think what we're looking at the moment is ways that we can start to reopen Arnold Feeney back up. We have a big building, and actually we've been in intense conversations this morning talking about how we do that, and it will absolutely be a phased approach. We have large gallery spaces, but we also have a big theatre space. We have a cafe bar, which is run by a partnership team. It's not run by us directly, although our bookshop is run by us. It feels like the first phase out of that will likely be our bookshop, in line with what's happening in Europe. We're thinking about how we can take those learnings forward to think about our gallery spaces. Our cafe bar will be a challenge in terms of kind of what restrictions currently operate, and also that's a really close conversation with our partners to see what they're comfortable with operating. And I think for us the biggest challenge is going to be our performance and critical inquiry programme, which takes place in our theatre, and for us is really where we collaborate and co-create most often. So I think for us that's the biggest piece of thinking.
Absolutely, that makes sense. And Andrew, you were explaining at the beginning of the call that obviously Imperial War Museums has a real variety of sites and environments that you're operating within. Tell us a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, and we're doing a lot of work right now to see how we can open those sites in a safe way, following all the safeguarding. And it's quite varied when you go from Duxford, which is an air base, basically, where we do our amazing air shows, and we have our Battle of Britain exhibit there, and the American Air Force Museum, to a place like the Belfast, which is it's a warship, you know. And how do you safeguard a warship versus, you know, so there's incredible work. And I mean, again, I'm in about a couple of months and I'm just so impressed with the team at IWM. They're all incredible. And the focus and and just on the details of all of that is what's going on now. And of course, you know, we're not bringing in any money right now commercially at all. So we have to look at that as well, you know, and what's the sequence to open. And then the other thing, my team and I are doing a lot of work on it, and I've got most of my team are on furlough right now as well, is what is a donor meeting and a donor event going to look like in the future? How do you do a cocktail reception when the chairman of the board says, I want 25 people around a table? Now, how does that work? So we're doing a lot of work with our caterers, restaurant associates, and just looking at how that's going to work. How does food prep, how's all that going to work? So there's a lot of work that needs to be done there. So it's going to be a couple of interesting months coming up, definitely.
I had an interesting call with one of our clients this week, who I think is with us today, just thinking about an event, an actual physical event that we might have in the autumn, and saying, how do we do that? How do you support the security guards? How do you support the caterers? There's many, many detailed questions to be worked out there.
And I also think donor meetings, you know, so much of, you know, as fundraisers, we all know, you sit across a table with someone, you want to see what their body language is, you want to see how they're reacting to what you're saying, and if they're wearing a mask, how do you do that?
And how do you make it special? Absolutely. Yeah. Stephanie, Sainsbury Centre is so interesting because you also, of course, have the sculpture gallery as well outdoors. So people have been interacting with the centre through the medium of sculpture, at least, throughout a lot of COVID. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. The gallery is set within the University of East Anglia's 350-acre site, and we've begun to create a sculpture park for East Anglia within that site, taking the natural environment with the built environment of the Dennis Lunsden architecture of the university, and of course Norman Foster's building of the Sainsbury Centre, and then populating that with sculptures. If there's one good thing I can say is that 4 of our sculptures were due to move to their next home at the start. So we still have them, which is fantastic. And they're a little longer. And also we are working on a programme to bring more to the sculpture park. That site, because it's on the periphery of the city centre, has meant that has become the new go-to exercise. Take your R exercise place with the children, run around the sculptures, walk by the Broad. There's a lovely lake there as well. And of course, people are beginning to discover the sculptures. So we were just talking as a team this morning about, you know, perhaps the sculpture park is where our focus needs to be, looking at what's outside the gallery at a time when it's going to be difficult to allow the footfall we would want inside the gallery.
And you were explaining to us earlier that, of course, as part of university, you're in line with that decision-making as opposed to independent decision-making in any case.
Yes, we're very much in the hands. We are owned by the gift was to the University of East Anglia, so we're in their hands as to when it's a campus university and when that opens up. But obviously, we want to get going as soon as we can, and we're getting our plans together, looking at security, which is a massive issue for us, and also distancing and how we run a shop. I completely agree with Andrew about, you know, how do we have that glass of wine and stand across from our donors, do those lovely events which we know they enjoy. I have a team of, I call them ambassadors. They're my eyes and ears because I am the team of one in development. And so it's rather lovely to have these contacts who are donors, who are chewing the cud with me and saying, well, how could we make this special for us? How can we still meet? How can we still explore art in the way we like to do it? And the word came back that, well, why don't we just have a 6 to 6:30 Zoom one evening? And I know certainly my curators are really keen to post up a picture and tell us about it. And we can then use that to inform them about what is coming up, and whether it's outside or inside the gallery. But keep that lovely feeling of camaraderie that we all have and that we've built up. A lot of the people came into the exhibition circle, we call our donors group, not knowing each other, but have formed friendships and like that little snapshot of art. And I think we've encouraged the relationship for them to sort of depend on us to give us that little snippet of art and culture that they really enjoy.
That's fantastic. And one of the things that you've all talked about in different ways, but has come across very clearly, is how I think you've all really sharpened your purpose in this period. And you all seem to have really honed in on the things that were important to you before. I'd love to hear about how you intend to maintain that going forward, because I can hear, I mean, some of the great examples of how you're working with different communities, but obviously we're going to emerge into another environment again that we don't fully understand. Helen?
So for us, it's going to be an interesting couple of weeks ahead. We have a new position starting in our team, which we're really excited about. We have a new engagement producer starting. As I understand, the interviews actually happened at the beginning of the year, and we were hoping that she would start with us much sooner, but it's the beginning of June when she'll begin, and we can't wait for her to get going. Her role is going to be really critical because all of the planning that we've been doing, we have had limited capacity to do some of that really, really critical engagement work. So once she's in place, actually the scene is set for her to really run with that. I had a call with her last week, and we were thinking about how we can be doing this digitally, and she has all sorts of interesting ideas about how do we do that engagement whilst we don't have a space to connect over. And actually her ideas around the fact that doing it digitally starts to break down that physical barrier that some of the communities we want to engage with might already feel as a bit of a physical barrier. That's dissolved away. So we're trying to use that as an opportunity to accelerate some of that work. So I think the next month or two for us are going to be really exciting to see what we can do in this new world.
It's great, because one thing that's really clear is that the digital engagement has brought us different audiences, and if we can hold on to those audiences, that would be superb. Andrew, what are your thoughts?
Well, I keep thinking, and I'm sure everyone has read it already, about McKinsey's, 5 R's of this phase, basically. And I think we're moving from resilience to reimagination. And I think in that reimagination phase, we've tried lots of different things. And I think certainly in this next phase, fundraising is going to have to be pretty agile, because it's also going to have to respond very much to what the organization's objectives are going to be. And those might be shifting and changing depending on how we're going to keep these museums going. And then I think after, reimagination, there's the reform phase, which is when we kind of take those strategies that we've tried and really figure out now, how do these become key elements of our new normal, as it's called. And I think digital is an interesting one, because we're all trying lots of different things, and I think it's all great. But it's also about how do we best maximize that for participation and support. And I think a lot of work has to be done around that. The Metropolitan Opera could do an online prom and raise $1 million, and that's great. But how is that each going to work for our own institutions in a way that will maximize the opportunity? So I think going forward, there's going to be a lot of analysis of that, and then how does that become part of our core strategies? But we're learning. We're all learning a lot in this phase, definitely.
As you say, the word nimble becomes so important here, because we're trying to learn as we're doing and plan at the same time. And I think that's one of the incredible things that you're all doing, is trying to manage those different tensions at the same time. Stephanie, over to you.
Well, I agree. And one thing that sort of struck me in sort of thinking about this whole scenario is just really how we have to be so adaptable. One thing works one week. People's moods are changing through this. We're all on the journey together. That's the thing. It isn't just us as museums and galleries changing. It is our donors. It is our visitors. And it's all just being very aware. And I think this is where the communication and the dialogue helps so much, because I'm learning from my donors and talking to them. I've got a very big challenge with corporate donors. I don't know if anybody else has that challenge as well. Where do we go there? Because life is very different for a lot of them. A lot of them we may not see again. So I'm just trying to keep very open and receptive to the things that people are telling me, and at the same way keeping the conversation going the other way as well.
And I'm really conscious that I should hand over to Kerry-Ann for questions from the floor. But in terms of your very good point there, Stephanie, I just refer to everyone to the great session we had a couple of weeks ago now on corporate partnerships, which involved fundraisers from the Old Vic and from the Lowry in Manchester, which I really recommend as good viewing. So Kerry-Ann, do we have some questions from our audience?
We do have some questions from our audience. Thank you, Caroline. We've had a few coming in today. There's been quite a bit of interesting chat on the live stream around what things might look like coming out of lockdown, the challenges that organisations have, particularly around theatre venues that may have challenges around social distancing, what that looks like. So we had, this isn't so much a question as just an opinion, but I think it's absolutely worthwhile sharing. So Rachel Williams from Park Theatre was saying that they are looking at the moment about possibly opening their cafe and bar space before they open their venue space, because obviously it's much more straightforward to socially distance in a cafe or bar than it is in a theatre. I think a lot of the theatre organisations that we're talking to, Caroline, I know a lot of your people you've been having these conversations around when can you open? At what point does it become financially viable to open a seated venue? I can see Helen nodding along here. I think there is some real challenges that everyone's facing around when that might be and at what point it can happen. And I think obviously venues have their own financial challenges around when those might be.
Karen, I'm conscious we've only 3 guests. We've probably can only take a couple of questions before the golden nugget. What shall we ask our panellists?
Certainly, I'm just having a look at the questions at the moment. So we've had a few.
Question before the call, didn't you?
Yes, I did. So I was speaking to Sarah from the People's Orchestra, who are a community orchestra based in Birmingham. And she was asking about what the expectation was around drops in income from shop and cafe revenue. So her expectation was that whilst galleries and museums might be able to reopen and socially distance their main spaces, will you be able to open your cafe space, your shop space, and therefore maintain your earned income from those streams? What's your feeling about that, Andrew?
Well, I mean, it's something we're looking at right now, and it goes even deeper because for us, you know, one of our key venues is Churchill's War Rooms, which is, you know, an amazing venue, but it's a bunker. So how do you social, and how do you get traffic through that? Because that is one of our key, you know, revenue generators, as it were. And of course, we also have the double-edged sword of tourism not coming back right away. And of course, we get a lot of tourists to that. So there's that whole thing is being worked on. And how do you create that opportunity? And then it depends also on what the social distancing requirements are going to be, how many people can be in the museum at the same time. Now we have this thing from Waterstones about if a book is touched, it has to go on quarantine for 72 hours. I mean, so yeah, I don't have an answer for you. It's all being discussed right now.
Absolutely. Helen, how are you going to cope with that at Arnafini?
Absolutely. So as I think I mentioned, we are thinking our bookshop will probably be our first step towards reopening. But there are absolutely challenges around that. What we're doing alongside it is thinking about our digital bookshop and thinking that's a space that we don't occupy at the moment. How can we, you know, potentially run both alongside each other? And does that get us to where we need to be? Probably not, but it's a step in the right direction. And I think for us, it's a learning curve as to how we then start to reenact the rest of the organisations. I think we have to take baby steps, and for us, that's one way we're thinking about doing it. I think in particular for us, it's I don't know how many people know the location of where we are in Bristol. We're right on the harbour. There's a lot of room around our building, and we've been thinking a lot around tourism. And if in the summer, in a couple of months' time, people are allowed, you know, to visit other cities as opposed to going away on other holidays, it feels like we're in a location to take advantage of some of that. So for us, being able to get our bookshop up and running, even if it is a very limited offer, is a baby step towards developing and taking advantage of whatever circumstance we can.
And taking that theme of the exact nature of the physical spaces, Stephanie, I'm thinking about the beautiful open plan modernist building that you have. Can you open up portions of that? How will it work for you?
Well, I think this is something, you know, again, when we're told we can, this is something, there's a team probably talking as I'm speaking now, trying to work out how we can do it. We do just early dialogues have been generated about putting a one-way system in through our galleries, and then creating a new pop-up bookshop at the end. So people, if we're changing the flow, making sure we still can have that lovely opportunity to give them. We know books are a great hit, and we've been doing some online sales while we've been closed. And what has been significant is that they have been books that have been bought. So we'll also have to think about our staff, of course, managing that, because the way people come into the front desk to pay for their ticket is also often the place of purchase. So do we have to change that and realign that a little bit, put up barriers? So there's lots of things that almost piggyback onto that whole commercial experience.
Fantastic. Karen, I can see a great question on the chat about trustees, which I'd love to hear the panelists answer.
Absolutely, yes. I was just flicking through and seeing which of those questions we've got time for. I think that's a great one. So this question comes from Natasha Bloor, who is our very own head of trusts. Natasha asks, are there ways that trustees can support development teams as we move out of lockdown? Helen, I can see you nodding. Would you like to pick that up first?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our board are meeting really regularly to support us through this. And I think what we are taking away from that is the breadth of experience that they have from all different sectors to support what we're doing. I think what's really interesting is we have a really new board of trustees here at Arnolfini, assembled over the last year. So we're really starting to understand how they can support us. And I think the time is now to really get that going. So yes, we are learning a lot from them about other sectors and how approaches there can support what we're doing, because I think it's a culmination of all of that idea. I think it's not just one answer.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that as well. I mean, we have an amazing foundation board at Imperial War Museum, and we just had a meeting last week. And what's great is that, you know, they're all out there, they're all understanding what's going on, especially with high net worth philanthropists and things like that. So they're really able to advise us on who we can go for, who we should wait on, things like that. They have been, and Matthew Westerman is our new chair, and he's fantastic. So we're very, very supported by a great board and foundation board and everything. So important, so important.
To hear, and so important. And I know just from a solidarity perspective, when you're all working so hard, just having that sense of those champions is really important. How's things at the Sainsbury Centre, Stephanie, in that regard?
Well, we have a fabulous board as well, who have been phenomenal. We've got a couple of new board members, which is always great because it just re-energizes everybody. And again, they're there for us to use and to draw on their contacts, their expertise. And I think the thing is, just talking to them, I was just thinking this morning, oh, I know who I must call today and just pick his brain over something, because they are there as a supportive role to us as well. And I think they do appreciate how tough it is. It's tough for them in their own business lives, but also they appreciate it in respect that it's not easy out there at the moment. And I think just to be able to have a board that listens, that you can ping an email to and say, does this sound about right to you? A chairman that you can approach and is hugely approachable, and you know will give you that little gem that you need to hear. Vital.
Wonderful.
And they're all available. They're all home.
Yes, I have to confess that at Achates we've been doing quite a bit of board training because we found it's much easier to be able to schedule these kind of things than it is a normal life. So there we are, some interesting developments. So I think that gives us a perfect segue to welcome our final and very special guest, which is Bernard Donoghue, who is Director of ALVA. And Bernard, you're going to present to us today the Achates Philanthropy Prize Golden Nugget, the words of wisdom to sum up things for us today. Over to you, Bernard.
Yes, which isn't at all intimidating. What a very, very scary sentence. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me along here. This has been absolutely fascinating to listen into. My favorite word of the last hour is friend raising, which I will now be, in the spirit of sharing, I will now be nicking and using myself. So there's a couple of responses that I've got to what I've heard so far. I mean, one is it will be gardens, parks, zoos, safari parks, outdoor spaces opening first. And partly because people have missed them, and partly because they feel safer than indoor spaces. I think the second thing is that museums and galleries will be slightly down the line, and then theatres, unfortunately, much further down the line. And again, that's all to do with the ability to properly adhere to social distancing, but also being economically viable to open. Now, we absolutely know, just before this session, I was on a Culture, Media and Sports Select Committee inquiry session in the House of Commons, and said that one of our remaining asks of government is that whilst we're very grateful for furloughing being extended beyond June and now to October, actually for our sector, we may still require furloughing right the way through to Christmas and possibly next year. Because for some intimate places like theatres and museums and galleries, it's just not economically viable to open if you're adhering to 2-metre distancing. You just can't do it. So I've made a particular plea for our sector. I was asked about the economics of our sector. And of course, when you're dealing with Treasury, that's the first question. We're a £157 billion industry. We're the 5th largest sector. We're the 3rd largest employer in the UK. We create 1 in 4 of all new jobs. But for me, and this is the nugget bit, for me, culture and the performing arts and heritage and tourism isn't just where you grow jobs, though we're really good at it. It's also where you grow people. And it's where you grow people in terms of their cultural curiosity or their sense of engagement and connectedness with the world or their local communities. And they find out about their history and their antecedents and the way that they can make a difference to lives. And that's incredibly important. And I suppose the last things, just before I finish, is I know from the webinars that we've been holding at Alva, a couple of things have happened. One is lots of members of the public now think they have a relationship with you, and that's a virtual one, and you don't know who they are. And I think that's a huge challenge. The second is that although all the attractions have been physically closed, they've been virtually open. And through online work, whether that's live streaming or webinars or zoo cams or virtual tours of galleries, people have managed to access you and understand your attractions in an amazing and extraordinary way. We always know that people, even though some museums and galleries are free of charge to enter, actually people are hesitant about crossing that barrier, that physical step. This has bypassed all of that and got them around it. So they've been creating a wish list of places to visit or to return to once we're allowed. And I suppose the last thing is just stepping back and reminding ourselves in the midst of all this madness, what is it that we do? And bluntly, you create the backdrop for people's happiest memories. It's no more sophisticated than that, but what a responsibility. And that means creating the places where people have their first dates, where they have weddings, where their kids learn about dinosaurs and evolution, where women scientists and artists are explained, where you get to know and see what power and inequality and social justice looks like through art and storytelling and through physical objects. The responsibility we all have, therefore, is enormous. And post-COVID, soft power and our cultural assets will be even more important to the economic well-being of the United Kingdom than they were 6 months ago. Because now, more than anything, more than the political handling of COVID, more than the ability for the NHS to respond, it will be our soft power which will come to the fore, because we still have the Old Vic, and we still have, fingers crossed, the Globe, and we still have the People's History Museum in Manchester, and we still have Edinburgh Castle. You create the backdrop for people's happiest memories, and that's bankable.
Bernard, thank you. I can't think of more inspiring words to conclude on. Thank you so much. And I don't know about anybody else, but I'm just very grateful that we have you to speak for us as a sector to select committee. So thank you for all that you're doing. It's really, really valued. And Kerry, I think that just brings us on time, hopefully, to say thank you to all our very special guests today. Helen Gaffney, Commercial Development Manager at the Untitled, Dr. Andrew Higgins, Director of Development at the Imperial War Museum, and Stephanie Renouf, Head of Development at the Sainsbury's Centre. Thank you all, and thank you again to you, Bernard, for those really special words. Kerry, can you tell us about next time?
Yes, absolutely. The next session is going to be a takeover by the Institute of Fundraising. I'm personally quite excited about it. So it's the Institute of Fundraising are taking over the session with their raise arm. That's all I can tell you at the moment. You will all receive the mailer about that shortly.
I think they're going to particularly think about fundraising as a profession and what's next, aren't they?
Absolutely, that's right, Caroline, thank you.
Yeah.
The session is on the 2nd of June, 2 p.m. as usual. It will be same time, same place. Just a bit of housekeeping, the sign-up details will be slightly different for that. We're trying a new method alongside how the Institute of Fundraising are running their sessions. So that should be quite interesting for us as an organisation, see how that works. But you will get all the information about that as usual. The sign-up process will be slightly different for that. But we will very much look forward to seeing as many of you as possible there as usual. And I hope you all stay safe and well in the meantime.
Lovely. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, everybody. Goodbye, and we will